Most leaders misread Gen Z, and I'm going to share with you a couple of data points to help at least partially understand the why and what's going on. So the first one is that only 12% of Gen Z in our recent survey say that they've had a job before 16 years old. And think about those as the lawn mowing, the lemonade stands, babysitting, those types of activities that kids can earn extra money before they even get their driver's license. Now let's compare that to other generations. Millennials, at that same question, 22%, so almost 2x. When you look at Gen X, it's 37, so 3 times as more likely to have those early jobs before 16. And then baby boomers are at 50%, so 4 times as likely to have those early jobs. So the headline here is that Gen Z is missing those early reps to get out there in the world and make a little money before they get to their traditional first jobs. But the other question I wanted to look at is we know Gen Z is getting their driver's license later. So I wanted to understand how cars relate to this question as well. This next data point was inspired by my good friend, Blanchette. She is the CEO of Norton Creative, a Houston advertising agency. She was on my podcast the other day and we were talking about job interviews and questions that are asked. She mentioned that she asks her candidates, what was your first car and how did you pay for it? And it was so fascinating to me, I decided to add it into my survey. So the first data point to me was shocking, is about 3 in 10, 28% to be specific, of Gen Z today have never had an access to a car on a regular basis. That is a huge number and obviously much higher than previous generations. But when it comes to who paid for the first car, we see the same pattern that we saw in the first jobs. Only 18% of Gen Z say they saved for the car and they bought it themselves with their own money. You can see how that pattern about millennials, Gen X, and boomers, it's exactly the same as we saw in that first job. So maybe there's a pattern and a connection between earlier jobs, financial responsibility, self-independence, and just being able to navigate kind of the adult landscape. So what's the so what, now what? This is not a story about Gen Z being lazy. It's a story to highlight the economic opportunities that were different and sometimes not provided to Gen Z. We have to remember Gen Z has come of age with the Uber generation, with remote everything, a gig economy. And so it's just a different landscape that they grew up in, to no issue of themselves. It's just the world that they were presented with. So here are 3 things that you might want to consider as it relates to Gen Z. And this last one might be good for parents. The first is try that question in your job interviews around what was your first car and who paid for it. It's not to ding those that their parents actually did help or paid for it in total. It's just helping understand the car is kind of this life metaphor in their first experiences with having a car. So that's a good question. The second is that if you're managing a Gen Z, whether you're a millennial, whether Gen X or boomers, those numbers of first jobs and first cars are materially different. There's so many other data points. So the insight is the framework of how you grew up is completely different than how Gen Z grew up. So don't get frustrated when they don't understand certain things. It's not because they're lazy, they just haven't had the reps. So part of it, they just need to learn, they need to have the mentors. Now the third is for parents out there. If you have a Gen Z child or even a Gen Alpha child, it is an opportunity for you to think differently in the value that the babysitting, the lemonade stands, the lawn mowing opportunities to have them get money in their pockets, their own money, and be able to set them up for success as they go into their first traditional jobs. Again, whether that's retail or fast food. I find this so fascinating because I think there's so much to learn around Gen Z and helping them be successful as they move into different life stages. I hope you enjoyed this one, and until next time.